Story 1. Labor does not automatically start if you lose the baby. You can try to induce labor, but sometimes it takes time. You can opt for a cesarean section, but surgery when it does not affect the life of the baby is not always the best option. I waited 8.5 months pregnant for 2 weeks before the induction worked. Until then, it was checking into the hospital, blood work, induction, contractions, and then nothing. I would go back home, rest a few days, and try again. I was fully pregnant and planning for afterward. Would there be a burial or cremation? What clothes should the baby wear? People still asked when I was due and similar questions. Even the phlebotomist asked about the baby, all cheery. The maternity phlebotomy team was busy, so they sent me to the regular hospital area. The woman there kept asking if it was a boy or a girl and when the big day was. I gave vague answers and pointed to my paperwork, hoping to clue her in. It did not work. She said I did not seem very excited. Seriously, maybe I was a surrogate or planning to put the baby up for adoption. Why did she assume it was all happiness and rainbows? Planning a funeral for a baby while still pregnant was awful. The birth was difficult. It was a dry birth, meaning there was no water in the sac, which made it more difficult and increased the risk of infection. I also broke my tailbone while pushing. I did not know why, but that felt especially unfair. Story 2. First trimester miscarriages are much more common than most people think. 1 in 4 pregnancies end before 3 months. Story 3. After giving birth, I sweated so much at night that I woke up soaking wet from head to toe for the first week or two. Story 4. Nobody warned me that my insides would feel as if they were falling out when I stood up during the first few days after giving birth. Story 5. Sometimes it takes weeks to be able to stand, sit, or walk again without a ton of pain. No one fucking told me that the first time. I was so focused on how the birth might be painful that I had no idea that for over a month afterward I would be at risk of burning to death if the house ever caught fire because I could barely walk. Story 6. Passing clots the size of rocks and bleeding for weeks afterward. Story 7. Can't believe this hasn't been mentioned. Hemorrhoids. Women often do not know they have them after labor because of swelling, so add it to the list. Story 8. What frightens me most is pelvic floor problems. Imagine suddenly being unable to control when you urinate. Story 9. Postpartum depression is extremely dangerous and can last for months after childbirth. After my twins were born, my wife experienced a complete personality change. She became suicidal and, at times, abusive toward me. At one point, she ran away from home. I found her 2 states away, and her brother had to bring her home. Things became very bad. The twins are 5 now, and she is the person I married again. She does not like to talk about those times. The only thing she will say is that it was the darkest time of her life. Story 10. The umbilical cord is dense, tough, and sinewy. When you cut it, you end up sawing slightly with the scissors. I did not know what to expect, but that was strange. Story 11. They pressed on my abdomen after birth to make sure everything was out. I had read some books, but no one prepared me for that. Felt like having another baby. Story 12. The feeling of your organs returning to their normal positions after being cramped for so long is a bit frightening, especially the lungs. When I stood up, I could feel them weighed down. People talk about cracked nipples and painful latching when discussing breastfeeding, but no one mentions uterine contractions in the first days after birth. Story 13. Contractions do not stop after labor. You will have afterbirth pains as your uterus returns to its usual pre-pregnancy size. Story 14. Postpartum mental illness is real, and it can be horrific. Story 15. I am currently pregnant. I have pregnancy rhinitis, which is like a cold caused by pregnancy. I also have morning sickness. Have you ever had uncontrollable sneezing while vomiting? Not bucket list worthy, I promise. Story 16. My wife's placenta would not detach after the birth of our daughter, so the nurse reached inside and removed it. I was oohing and eyeing over our new baby girl when I looked over and saw someone nearly elbow deep, handling my wife like a sock puppet. It was jarring. Mothers are incredibly tough. It's unreal. Story 17. The leading cause of death in pregnant and postpartum women in the United States is homicide. Story 18. It seemed to be taking a long time for my obstetrician-gynecologist to stitch up tears and an episiotomy. I asked my labor and delivery nurse if that was normal. She whispered that I was torn from clitoris to anus and that it would take as long as it takes. Story 19. Hyperemesis gravidarum was terrible. I lost 50 pounds during my pregnancy because of it. Story 20. A short time before you give birth, from 1 to a few days before, you may pass a mucus plug, which is a thick plug of mucus that dislodges from the cervix and is expelled from the vagina. When you birth your baby, you also deliver the placenta. When the placenta detaches from the uterine wall, it leaves a raw wound about the size of a dinner plate that can bleed for weeks. Make sure you have plenty of large maxi pads on hand. Many people say everything smells unpleasant during the first trimester and that it causes persistent nausea. Even things you previously enjoyed may suddenly smell offensive. Some people experience this throughout pregnancy, sometimes with vomiting. Your baby will go home with an umbilical stump that dries and forms a scab. Cutting the umbilical cord at birth does not make the stump fall off immediately. It gradually dries over several days and then separates. Story 21. When you have a cesarean section, a segment of intestine that lies over the uterus may be temporarily removed from the abdominal cavity and placed in a sterile basin beside the surgical field. After the baby is delivered and the uterus is sutured, the intestines are returned to the abdomen and the incision is closed. Usually the intestines are simply retracted to the side. In many cases, the uterus is partially exteriorized so the baby can be delivered. Story 22. You will need to prepare yourself for the second birth. The second birth is the first full bowel movement after childbirth. Story 23. Post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from a difficult birth is more common than you might think. I still experience symptoms even now, and my daughter is 10. Story 24. Near the end of my pregnancy, I had severe gingivitis, which can be caused by pregnancy, and carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands from swelling that lasted for months after delivery. I had a cesarean section, and the swelling in my legs and ankles was so painful that it lasted for weeks. I could barely bend my knees and my ankles seemed to disappear. Story 25. If you have labor to full dilation, you can still end up with an emergency cesarean section, so you do not gain the supposed benefits of avoiding vaginal delivery, such as being able to sit down or the baby having a nice round head. If the baby's head is stuck in the birth canal when the obstetrician performs the cesarean section, freeing it produces a loud squelching pop as the suction breaks. Can be quite unnerving to hear. Story 26. There is a very high chance you will pass stool during childbirth. Pushing can cause this. If you do not pass stool during labor, you may pass a larger amount afterward. The baby will often pass stool on you during skin-to-skin contact immediately after birth. Story 27. Preeclampsia can last up to 6 weeks after delivery. You would be surprised how many emergency personnel do not know this. When asked about your medical history, volunteer that you are in the postpartum period and do not wait for them to ask. Story 28. The placenta is about the size of a plate and leaves an internal open wound of that size that must heal. Edit. The responses and the shock this causes make me really angry about the level of maternal education and care being provided. Story 29. My belly button popped out when I was pregnant. It was visible through my shirts and was terribly embarrassing. Hemorrhoids are often unavoidable, and doctors frequently need to examine them. If you go past your due date, a doctor or midwife may want to separate the membranes. You may not want to look it up. It is not pleasant. I probably had a bowel movement while I was giving birth. I am afraid to ask, and if so, many people saw it. My breasts were leaking so much after I gave birth that my cats treated me like a drinking fountain. It was a strange way to wake up. Story 30. You are likely low in iron. Iron supplements may make you very sick. Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheat cereal contains 100% of the daily value of iron per serving. Put 2 measuring cups in a zip-top bag and snack on them throughout the day. Story 31. If you are a short person carrying a large baby, your rib cage will take a beating. I am 5 feet 2 inches tall with long legs but a short trunk. My son measured 21 inches and weighed 8 pounds 13 ounces at birth. During the last 2 months before birth, he had no room. His kicking and stretching reached my sternum. I was bruised for weeks after delivery. I did not notice any vaginal pain, probably because my ribs were so sore. Story 32. This is not gruesome, but postnatal depression is the worst thing I have experienced in my life. It has been 5 years since my last episode, and I am still struggling. No amount of help from the doctors has worked, and I have no support from anyone else. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. I do not even know who I am anymore. All I wanted was to meet the love of my life and be a mother. Now I look in the mirror and do not recognize myself. My body does not feel like my own, and I cannot think of a worse fate than having another child. Do not get me wrong. I love my children, but if I had known what was coming, I would not have put myself through this. Story 33. You can be essentially allergic to being pregnant. I had a condition called pruritic urticarial papules and plaques of pregnancy. My skin itched all over. It was so excruciating that scratching only made it worse. Topical creams and medications did not relieve the itching. My legs and belly were the worst. I used to soak my feet and calves in ice water to try to relieve the burning. I could not sleep more than 1 hour at a time. Eventually, I found a soap that gave me 3 to 4 hours of relief, pine tar soap, so I just showered all the time and used a lot of soap and water. This started at 25 weeks and lasted until 38 weeks, before I told my doctor I could not take it anymore and she decided to perform a cesarean section. The condition resolved as soon as the baby was delivered. I will never get pregnant again. Believe it or not, that is the mild condition. There is a more serious one that affects the liver and can put the baby at risk, called intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. Pregnancy was awful for me. Story 34. Every pregnancy can be very different. The unpleasant symptoms you experienced the first time may not return. You may have different ones. Sometimes medications do not take effect before a cesarean section. I felt the procedure completely during my 3rd cesarean. Story 35. Thank you to everyone in this thread for confirming that having children is not for me. I admire all of you who have chosen to have children. You are strong and very brave. Story 36. If you need to vomit, sit on the toilet and use a trash can. You might need to have a bowel movement while breastfeeding, even in the middle of a feed. Sit on the toilet while the baby feeds. This will not be the strangest experience in parenting. Story 37. I was visiting a friend after she came home from the hospital with her newborn. I asked how it went, and she said something like, "It really hurt when they stretched me." I, a clueless man, had no idea what she meant. So I asked, "What do you mean?" She explained that stretching is a lot better than tearing during delivery. My brain tried to compute what she was saying, and when it clicked, I nearly passed out. Women are tough. The same person later experienced postpartum depression, although we did not know it at the time. A few weeks later, I was visiting her again, and she said something to the effect of, "I want to throw this baby at the wall." I kept my composure and took the baby, telling her to go have some time to herself, but I was freaking out internally. I called my mother, who had never met the baby, to come over, and she dropped what she was doing to help this stranger. My mother is a saint. I also called the parents, who lived a few hours away, and told them they needed to come up as soon as possible. Everything turned out okay, but it was a lot for about 20-year-old me to deal with. Story 38. If you do not have adequate calcium intake, your body will withdraw calcium from your bones and teeth. Medieval Europeans believed that women would lose 1 tooth for each pregnancy. Story 39. I am not sure if it is gruesome, but when they remove your placenta during a cesarean section, you can feel tugging near your collarbone. Story 40. The most terrifying thing about this post is that none of this information is taught to us. We are kept in the dark intentionally. This is horrifying. Story 41. If you have hyperemesis gravidarum, you can vomit so forcefully that you rupture blood vessels in your cervix. I thought I was losing my twins, but it was just the effects of vomiting 30 to 70 times per day. I experienced that for 5 months while sitting on my couch receiving intravenous therapy. Story 42. My wife is driving herself nuts with worst-case scenario doom scrolling about pregnancy and childbirth, since we are trying to conceive. I am commenting because she knows my username and will read every comment in this thread. Hi, Lady Aisha. Story 43. The first time you have sex after childbirth, even if it has been 6 weeks, is excruciating. Edited to add. This refers to the woman. Story 44. If this sounds gruesome, you can save your placenta and donate it to the training of human remains detection dogs. These dogs need human tissue to train, and a placenta can be a significant donation because medical specimens are costly. I emailed or called a local search and rescue team and asked if they would accept my donation. They were grateful. I brought a small cooler to the hospital, told the staff, kept the placenta on ice until I was discharged, and then stored it in the freezer until the dog trainer picked it up. I also took a picture with the dogs that would be trained. Story 45. I secrete a disgustingly rank fluid called lochia for about 8 weeks after giving birth. It includes blood. My vagina smelled worse than Satan's asshole. Story 46. Do not stand up immediately after giving birth unless there is an absorbent pad in place. I had a natural birth. The nurse left the room, and I got up to use the bathroom. A blood-colored fluid rushed out and formed a large puddle on the floor. I stood there, shocked. The nurse returned almost immediately, shook her head, and blamed herself. She said she had forgotten to tell me not to get up until she put down towels and other supplies because most new mothers cannot get out of bed due to numbing medication. Story 47. The pain when my milk came in was intense. I had never been well endowed, but my breasts swelled 5 sizes and became rock solid. I could not touch them, wear clothing, or lie down. I contemplated having them removed, but instead I took decongestants to dry up my milk supply. Story 48. If you have a really bad headache later in your pregnancy, take your blood pressure. If it is high, call the triage line and get evaluated. You can be fine one day and develop preeclampsia the next. It can come on suddenly and severely and can damage your kidneys. You can still have severe postpartum hemorrhoids after a cesarean section. Edema. You may have significant swelling in your legs and elsewhere after pregnancy. It is relatively normal and should go away as your body eliminates the extra fluid. Story 49. I'm child-free, but these comments have me feeling a certain way. Honestly, mothers are superhuman. Women are incredible. Story 50. I had terrible pain when my milk was drying up. Binding helped. Pushing during childbirth can cause hemorrhoids. With my first child, a nurse actually called the other nurses to see them because they were so large. I should have been embarrassed, but I did not care. Story 51. The only way I could urinate was in the shower with warm water running over me. I did not have a bowel movement for a week afterward. When I finally did, I was so excited I called my boyfriend at work to tell him, "Your breasts will leak. They will also become very hard if you do not massage them or express some milk." Breastfeeding at first can be very painful. Story 52. Your bladder can become temporarily unable to function after a cesarean section. It took me 4 days to be able to urinate. The number of catheters they inserted made me cry. I could not get a permanent catheter until an order was placed, so they kept using temporary ones to make sure I did not burst my bladder. The pain was intense while I was being held together with staples. Story 53. If you take antibiotics after giving birth and breastfeed, your baby may have projectile stools. Story 54. Your ligaments can loosen and allow your pelvis to separate too far. It is terrible. Story 55. If you have a cesarean section, you may never regain feeling around your scar. It is strange to scratch something and not be able to feel it. The area can remain sensitive or painful even years later. You may also develop scar tissue on your uterus, so menstrual periods can make the scar hurt. It is fun being a woman. Story 56. When I had to pee for the first time after giving birth, I had no control over my bladder and left a trail to the bathroom. I wish someone had warned me about that and about the first postpartum bowel movement. But that first shower after childbirth is amazing. Story 57. Uterine and bladder prolapse. I was horrified when I finally looked down there a few weeks postpartum and saw the damage. Postpartum physical therapists are miracle workers. Story 58. More people need to know about and talk about perinatal depression. I was prepared for the possibility of postpartum depression, but I did not expect to experience suicidal thoughts in mid-pregnancy. Perinatal depression affects about 1 in 10 pregnancies and can be related to hormonal changes. If you are not feeling okay, please reach out to your care team. They can connect you with the treatment and support you need without judgment. Story 59. Morning sickness is not always just a few throw-ups now and then. It can be a debilitating, round-the-clock condition called hyperemesis gravidarum that leads to dehydration, fainting, and weight loss. Mine was so severe I needed a medication pump. I stopped trying to explain to people who said they had been sick too. Another is when your liver starts misbehaving, cholestasis of pregnancy, which causes severe itching on the palms and soles. It was bad enough that I sometimes lay in bed with socks on my hands, crying myself to sleep because my skin was raw from scratching. It only lasted the last few days of my pregnancy, or I think I might have gone insane. Story 60. You can do everything right. No drugs, no alcohol, take the right prenatal vitamins, avoid sushi and cookie dough, and drink plenty of water. You can still find yourself staring at the 20-week ultrasound in shock when the nurse tells you there is a birth defect. It was completely out of left field for me and felt like my world was crashing down. I am proud to say he was born with a cleft lip, had surgery at 6 months, and at 2.5 years he is in speech therapy and seeing a nutritionist, but otherwise he is a healthy and happy boy. Story 61. All of your joints and ligaments become flexible and loose because your body produces the hormone relaxin. This is necessary to allow your body to stretch for pregnancy and delivery, but when I had a severe cough, it triggered coughing fits so intense that I would vomit and urinate at the same time. Story 62. I gave birth more than 2 years ago, more than 2 months early because of preeclampsia. My blood pressure peaked at dangerous levels and I had to have an emergency cesarean section. Right after giving birth, my blood pressure returned to normal. 6 months ago, my blood pressure started rising again and kept increasing. Diet changes did not help. I went to the doctor and was diagnosed with hypertension. Apparently, more than half of people who have had preeclampsia eventually develop hypertension. I had no idea. Also, passing blood clots after birth the size of a lemon can be normal. Oh, pregnancy brain is real and is caused at least partly by the fact that blood volume increases by about 25 to 50%, and it increases even more when carrying multiples. I had twins, while the number of red blood cells does not increase proportionally. This dilution slightly reduces oxygen carrying capacity, which can cause minor memory lapses. I forgot the lyrics to every song I knew, and my memory returned a couple of months after giving birth. Story 63. During my first pregnancy, my teeth began to deteriorate as if I had brushed them with acid. The doctors were uninformed and said I had a deficiency. They were not very concerned. I have endured 20 years of excruciating pain from broken teeth, exposed nerves, and abscesses because I never had insurance or the finances to get treatment. It has affected my life in many ways, from changing my diet to losing job opportunities because of my appearance. This was not mentioned in any pregnancy pamphlet, at least not in 2000. Story 64. We believe that women with postnatal psychosis who end their lives while unwell do so almost always in a violent manner, for example by setting themselves on fire, because the inbuilt maternal protective instinct turns inward and they perceive themselves as the threat. Source: Perinatal Psychiatric Nurse. Story 65. After you give birth, if you are bleeding heavily, your obstetrician will reach up inside you and scoop out all the clots with their hands while also applying pressure to your uterus. It's lovely. Story 66. I have not experienced this personally, but some people have intense shaking of the body after giving birth, usually after the placenta is delivered, though sometimes it occurs earlier. The shaking can be so severe that one cannot even hold a cup, much less a baby. The body is adjusting to the realization that the baby is no longer inside. Story 67. I don't know, but every anti-choice legislator in the United States should be forced to read this entire thread. Story 68. No one warned me that my abdominal muscles would be so wrecked that breathing was hard for a while. Compression helps. Story 69. At about 7 months, I told my husband I could feel my skin expanding all over my body, my arms, belly, back, and breasts. He had the audacity to chuckle and say, "I don't think so. You know it's hormones." I told him that if he said the word hormones again in the next 2 to 8 months, I would smash his head into the oven door and then bake his liver. Yes, hormones will have you saying some weird things, but I was deadly serious. Story 70. Many people have difficulty conceiving. They often do not want to discuss it publicly or be reminded about it. Refrain from teasing couples about when they will start having children, because they may already be trying and experiencing difficulty conceiving. Story 71. I am showing this thread to my wife so we can celebrate, for the 100th time, that I got a vasectomy. Story 72. The United States has the highest maternal death rate of any developed country, and it is rising. But yes, abortion is the problem. Story 73. Not everyone knows that you can develop temporary diabetes during pregnancy. Sometimes it persists and you develop type 2 diabetes. Your risk of type 2 diabetes increases by about 50% if you have had gestational diabetes. This is how I developed type 2 diabetes at the age of 32. Story 74. If you have an ectopic pregnancy in Idaho, prepare to die. That is the sad truth as of a few days ago. Story 75. Postpartum hives. I never had them with my first, but 2 to 3 days after getting home with my son, I was covered from head to toe with tiny, itchy bumps. It was excruciating, especially around my cesarean section scar, since I could not scratch. Story 76. There are stitches in the area. Feels like sitting on barbed wire. Combined with hemorrhoids the size of a fist, going to the bathroom for a bowel movement is torture. Story 77. You can bleed out after childbirth. You can also develop pregnancy-related hypertension up to 6 weeks after delivery, which means you could have a seizure or stroke at home with a newborn or suffer a severe headache that feels like death. Story 78. During pregnancy, the baby can cause your ribs to separate, which can be unbearable. A healthy person with a healthy pregnancy can still die while giving birth. I almost died while giving birth to both of my children despite having no prior issues. I hemorrhaged for hours and required 2 emergency blood transfusions. I barely survived. Story 79. You can get varicose veins on your vulva, and it can be very painful. The pressure on your pelvic floor and vulva worsens as the baby gets bigger. The pain went away immediately after he was born. Story 80. During my last pregnancy, I developed carpal tunnel syndrome and had to wear wrist braces on both hands. The pain kept me awake and woke me at night. I would cry because my wrists felt like they were being crushed. It made daily life a nightmare. Any action that required using my hands caused searing pain. Story 81. I think the death rate alone is something we do not discuss. Giving birth is traumatic. We never consider how dangerous it actually is. We just want people to have children. Story 82. You are legally and morally responsible for another person's health, safety, and well-being for about 20 years afterward. Many people do not realize this. Story 83. I developed new allergies, gallstones, and liver enzyme issues. My body mass index did not reflect my condition. I am at a healthy weight but skinny fat. Story 84. Honestly, I wish people would acknowledge how long pregnancy and breastfeeding can last. Society often moralizes so much that any woman who smokes, uses substances, struggles with substance use, or needs regular medications while pregnant or breastfeeding is treated as selfish or vile. It is a very long time. I am not encouraging unsafe practices, but we should be empathetic to people with substance use disorders and to women who want some autonomy over their bodies during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Story 85. How many totally random body parts that have nothing to do with growing a baby are affected by pregnancy hormones? 1. Your freckles and moles can change shape and size. 2. You can get tinnitus during pregnancy. It usually goes away after giving birth. 3. Your feet can permanently increase in size. 4. You can get dark patches on your face. 5. Increased skin tags. 6. Weird, vivid dreams. 7. Carpal tunnel syndrome. Chronic nasal congestion. 9. restless legs syndrome. 10. Excess earwax. 11. A metallic taste in your mouth. 12. Charlie horse cramps. 13. Excessive saliva production. 14. Worsening eyesight. Pregnancy is wild. Story 86. Not everyone experiences the flood of emotions that makes you forget all the pain and misery of childbirth. I remember every moment. No, I did not have a second child. Story 87. This entire thread solidifies my selfishness when it comes to not having children. I can barely control my body now. Why would I force this change on myself? All you mothers are incredible warriors. Story 88. Postpartum hallucinations can be intense. The lack of sleep, raging hormones, and your body feeling as if it has been hit by a train contribute to this. I was convinced I'd lost my baby in my bed. Luckily, the baby was safe in their basket. Story 89. Your placenta filters toxins and can be fatal to you and your baby. People still insist on eating it. Story 90. Obstetric violence is surprisingly common, and there is very little recourse for victims. I edited this to remove my personal story because I am not ready to share it. I will keep the information about obstetric violence to help raise awareness of the issue. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.